Welcome. Come in. Close the door and get comfortable. And listen closely. They say life slips through our fingers, but the truth is, many have never even tried to hold on to it. We think we're living, but in reality, we're merely surviving an endless list of expectations, duties, guilt, and grudges. We become experts at planning a future that never arrives, carrying backpacks no one asked us to bear, and justifying ourselves with a resigned, "that's life," as if surrender were part of the contract of existence. But tell me, what would you do if you discovered everything you believe about life is wrong? I'm not talking about small mistakes. I'm not referring to details you could improve with a motivational talk or an inspiring video online. I'm talking about the great lie upon which you've based your existence. The trap that keeps you stuck in a loop where happiness is always a when and never a now. When I finish college, when I find the right person, when I have stability, when I feel ready. What if I told you that idea of happiness you're chasing was designed so you never reach it? Throughout this audiobook, we're not going to tell you what to do with your life. We won't give you a list of the 5 habits of happy people, nor will we ask you to repeat affirmations in front of the mirror, hoping you magically believe what you say. We're going to break patterns. We're going to open the box where you've kept who you really are. Because yes, there is a version of you that already knows the truth, a part of you that remembers what it's like to live without fears, without judgments, without imposed burdens. And that part of you wants no more excuses, no more waiting. It wants to be free. This audiobook isn't passive reading. It's not a pretty message you'll forget tomorrow. It's a challenge, a call to question everything that's held you back until now. It's a journey back to yourself. So if you're still here, get ready. Because after this book, you'll never see yourself the same way again. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Farce of Being Perfect. He woke up and looked at his phone before even taking a breath. He turned it on like someone connecting their lifeline to reality. A message, a like, an unimportant email. Nothing that would save his life, but enough to delay 5 more minutes the moment he'd have to face the mirror. He was 34 years old, but inside he felt the weight of 80. Not physically, because age isn't worn on the skin, but in that sense of perpetual exhaustion. It was that existential fatigue no 8 hours of sleep could fix. From the outside, he had it all. An apartment with white walls and expensive furniture that reminded him of a decade spent chasing stability. A job that allowed him to pay for that lifestyle at the sole cost of selling his soul in monthly installments. A partner with whom he shared space, but not comfortable silences. Virtual friends who reacted to his photos but never called him on a Wednesday afternoon. He lived in a perfect showcase, but inside was a mess without subtitles. He thought about the Sundays of his childhood, when life was a state of absolute presence, when happiness fit in a bicycle, a ball, the sound of his mother's voice calling him to dinner. When time didn't exist because there was no need to measure it. Now Sundays were something else, a prelude to anxiety before Monday, a black hole of emptiness disguised as rest. No matter how many coffees he drank, how many trips he planned, or how many mindfulness courses he took, he always returned to the same place, the feeling of being lost in his own life. He had played the game as he was told to. He studied right. He worked enough. He became what society called a functional adult. Yet there he was, functional but not happy, existing but not living. Then a question seeped into his mind like a leak in a dam that could no longer hold back. When exactly did you stop being the protagonist of your own story? Imagine life as a grand theater, and we humans play roles. From childhood, we are taught to perform the role of what we should be. They tell us that if we study well, work hard, and follow certain rules, we will be happy. But who defined those rules? Who said that following the script of perfection would truly make us happy? The truth is that life isn't a script, and the problem isn't following it, but believing that the script is all we are. This is a man who now realizes he never truly lived his life, not because opportunities were lacking, but because he learned to postpone them. There was always something more urgent, more important, more sensible than being happy. He spent the best years of his youth convinced happiness was a prize to come after achieving what he was supposed to. He got up early, fulfilled his responsibilities, did the right thing. He was efficient, productive, reliable. The kind of person everyone admires because they never stray from the path. The kind of person who never seems to lose control. But inside him, there was a war nobody saw, a constant background noise, a feeling that something didn't fit, that something fundamental was slipping through his fingers. And one day, without warning, his body said enough. It wasn't a heart attack. It wasn't a diagnosable illness. It was something more subtle and lethal, the weight of all the feelings he never allowed himself to feel. He woke up one morning and simply couldn't get up, not because he was tired, but because something inside him had broken irreparably. The doctors told him it was stress. His boss recommended a vacation. His friends said he needed a hobby, but he knew it wasn't that. He knew he had spent too long existing without truly inhabiting himself. Then he remembered something he'd once read. If life feels like a cage, maybe it's not life that's small, but the way you're living it, the way you're imprisoning yourself. That phrase stayed with him, because he realized the cage wasn't his job, nor his responsibilities, nor even his fears. The cage was his own idea of what life should be. And that morning, without doing anything extraordinary, without making a radical decision, he did the only thing he'd never allowed himself to do. He stopped. He let the silence catch him, let life speak without him trying to interpret or make sense of it. And for the first time, he felt the weight of all the moments he'd let pass waiting for something that never came. He realized happiness wasn't a goal. It wasn't a destination to reach after ticking off all the boxes. It was something that had always been there, waiting for him to stop long enough to notice it. That day, he did nothing heroic. He didn't quit his job. He didn't sell everything to travel the world. He didn't start writing a book or practicing meditation. He simply allowed himself to exist without justifying his existence. And for the first time in a long time, he felt alive. Since childhood, we are taught to wait. That life starts when we finish school, when we get a degree, when we find someone, when we achieve stability. We become experts in postponing existence, as if there were always one more step to climb before we can enjoy. But what if the greatest deception isn't the goal, but the race itself? What's curious is that no one explains how to stop. If you ask people what fullness means, they will say it's finding purpose, love, abundance, peace. But if you ask when they will feel fulfilled, the answer becomes blurry, conditional, evasive. We live in a mental hamster wheel. We run chasing a satisfaction that keeps moving forward like a carrot on a stick, not because anyone forces us, but because we never stop to question the game's structure. It's funny. Sometimes life gives us clear signs we're running in circles. Insomnia disguised as ambition, anxiety turned into productivity, the feeling of emptiness amidst success. People say, "I need a break," and translate it into a week of vacation that only serves to return to the same exhaustion point, like a temporary reset of the same mistake. But stopping is an art no one taught us. It's not about giving up growth or settling. It's about realizing that fullness isn't after something, but within everything. It's not a destination. It's how you decide to inhabit the present moment without the excuses you've used all your life to postpone it. Some spend decades chasing the idea of an ideal life without noticing the real life crumbling at their feet. The obsession with getting there makes us the biggest saboteurs of our own existence. And the most ironic thing is that when we arrive, when we reach the goal, it rarely feels like we imagined. It's like the child who dreamed of growing up to be free, only to discover that adulthood is full of obligations. Like the worker who worked himself to the bone to buy a house and then never has time to enjoy it. Like the lover who idealized love so much that, when he finally has it, he wears it down with unrealistic expectations. There's a story that isn't written in self-help books, but it's the most important of all. The story of the moment you stop searching and start seeing. That instant when you stop measuring life by what's missing and begin to appreciate it for what it is. But that moment rarely comes by choice. It almost always comes as a blow, an illness, a loss, a crisis. Something that shakes you so hard it destroys the structure that kept you busy chasing. Because when everything falls apart, you realize there's no other place to be but here. What if, instead of waiting for the blow, we chose it consciously? If we gave ourselves permission to stop before life forced us to? If we understood that maturity isn't the accumulation of years or achievements, but the ability to live without the need to chase anything. This isn't about conformism. This isn't about resignation. It's about something more radical. The freedom of not depending on a later to be happy. When I was a child, I heard a story that seemed absurd at the time. It said that there was a man who spent his entire life searching for the source of happiness. One day, after decades of pilgrimage, someone told him that the source was on a distant mountain. Without hesitation, he sold everything he had and set out. He climbed with the excitement of someone about to find the ultimate answer. But when he reached the top, he found nothing but a stone with a message carved into it. Go home. Happiness was there from the beginning. At that moment, as a child, I thought the story was a joke. How could someone spend their whole life searching for something they already had? But with the years, I understood that the story wasn't about happiness. It was about all the time we waste believing that life is somewhere else, in another moment, in another version of ourselves that doesn't exist yet. The great trick of the modern world is to sell us the illusion that everything worthwhile is in the future. Happiness on a trip we haven't taken, peace in a spiritual retreat we haven't paid for, fulfillment in a partner we haven't met, as if we were incomplete until something external confirms otherwise. But what if the problem was never what we're missing, but our inability to see what we already have? We spend years worrying about what we haven't achieved, without realizing that the time we spend worrying is the same time we could have used to live. It's like being hungry in front of a plate of food and, instead of eating, arguing about whether another plate might be better. Buddhism has said for centuries that human suffering comes from resisting reality. We want things to be different, people to be different, time to bend to our expectations. But life doesn't negotiate with desires. Life happens as it is, not as we wish it would. We've been taught to fight against what is, to improve, to evolve. And yes, growth is beautiful. But there's a difference between growing and running away. Most people don't grow. They escape. They run from their present under the excuse of a better future. Some hide in religion, hoping God will fix what they don't dare face. Others in money, believing that once they have more, they'll finally be happy. Some hide in relationships, in travel, in distractions, in the hope that something, someday will click, and suddenly everything will make sense. But there's no click, no magical epiphany, no day when you wake up and suddenly everything is clear. There is only this moment. And the only difference between those who live in peace and those who don't is that some have decided to inhabit their present, while others keep chasing a mirage. Maturity is, in essence, the end of waiting. Waiting for circumstances to be perfect, for your body to look the way you want, for love to arrive, for the past to sort itself out, for life to give you permission to be happy. Maturity is realizing that there's no permission to wait for, that there's no finish line, that fulfillment isn't the reward for a perfect life. It's what happens when you learn to live without conditions. There once was a man who spent his days collecting sand on the beach. His dream was to build the largest sandcastle in the world. Every day from sunrise to sunset, he shaped his towers with meticulous care, making sure every grain was in its place. But the tide, relentless, always came to wash his work away, and he, stubborn, started again. Tourists watched him with a mix of admiration and pity. Some called him an artist, others a madman, but no one dared to ask why, until a curious child broke the silence. "Sir, why do you keep building if the sea keeps destroying it?" The man smiled and answered without lifting his eyes. "Because the castle was never the point. What matters is that I love building." That is the difference between someone who's awake and someone still asleep in the illusion of the search. The one asleep believes happiness lies in the finished castle. The one awake knows the joy is in building it, even knowing that one day it will disappear. Most people live as if life were a series of goals to be achieved, as if existence had checkpoints that, once reached, would guarantee peace and satisfaction. But what they don't see is that each goal only opens the door to another. There is no final destination, no point where you can say, "That's it, I've made it, now I can finally be happy." So then, what's the point of all the running? This is the dilemma of our time. We were promised that success would bring peace, but what we got was anxiety. We were told that love would make us feel complete, but we ended up carrying suffocating expectations. We were taught that more money means more peace of mind, but the fear of losing it grows in proportion to what we accumulate. We became children waiting for a reward that never comes. We became experts at postponing life. The Stoics spoke of memento mori, remember that you will die, not as a pessimistic message, but as a call to wake up. If we truly remembered that each day could be our last, most of our worries would lose their meaning. And yet, here we are, fearing the future as if it were a monster lurking in the dark. Living in our heads with endless what-ifs, trapped between what could have been and what is yet to be. When was the last time you were truly here? Not in the future, not in the past, here. Not waiting for someone to arrive, not dreaming of another body, another job, another city, here. The present is not a philosophical concept. It's a muscle that atrophies if we don't use it. And most people have it completely paralyzed. They've spent so long anticipating what's next or lamenting what's gone. They've forgotten what it feels like to simply be. But here's the truth. There is no other moment. There is no other life waiting around the corner. There is no second chance to go back and do it differently. What we have is this moment, this breath. And if we don't learn to inhabit it, we'll end up like the man with the sandcastle, torn apart by the tide, realizing too late that we spent our entire lives building something that was never truly ours. Once in a small village, there was an old man everyone respected, not because he was the wisest or the richest, but because he had a strange tranquility. No matter what happened, he always smiled with the calm of someone who had understood something the rest had not. One day, a young man arrived, desperate. "Master, my life is a mess. I don't know what to do. I feel lost." The old man, without looking up, asked him to follow him to a nearby river. When they arrived, he scooped up a handful of water and let it trickle through his fingers. "Tell me, young man, what do you think would happen if I tried to hold the water more tightly?" "It would slip through faster," the young man replied. "Exactly," said the old man with a smile. "The same thing happens with life. The more you try to control it, the more it escapes you." This is the dilemma of the modern world. We've been taught to have a plan, to follow a path, to calculate every step. But life is not a math problem, it's a river. And the more we try to control it, the more we despair at its unpredictability. Not long ago, I saw a man on the subway shouting at his reflection in the window. He wasn't crazy. He looked like anyone else, wearing a suit, carrying a leather briefcase, a shiny watch on his wrist. But there was something broken in his eyes. People glanced at him sideways, uncomfortable, pretending not to see. I couldn't help but wonder, how many times have we done the same without realizing it? Not on the subway, but in the bathroom mirror, in the silence of the night, in the car, waiting at a red light, in those quiet moments when the noise of the world fades and we are suddenly face to face with everything we've spent the day trying to avoid. We live at war with ourselves, punishing ourselves for what we didn't do, what we didn't become, what we failed to achieve, carrying expectations we don't even know where they came from, but bearing them as if we owed someone something. There is a silent epidemic no one is tracking. It doesn't show on the skin, it can't be seen at first glance, but it's killing more souls than any virus. It's called living at war with oneself. Where does that war come from? We've been made to believe that being enough is a finish line, that there's a moment in life when we'll finally be able to breathe easy, once we're more successful, more attractive, more loved, more validated. And so we spend our lives running after something that never truly arrives, like the man on the subway, dressed in success but falling apart inside. The greatest enemy of a full life isn't failure, it's the never-ending feeling of being incomplete. They told us life was a staircase, that every step brought us closer to the top, to that state of perfection where supposedly everything would finally make sense. But they never told us the most important thing. The staircase has no end. Every time you think you've arrived, another step appears, and then another, and another, until one day you realize you've spent your whole life climbing without ever giving yourself permission to stop and enjoy the view. What's curious is that if we observe closely, children don't have that problem. They're not worried about being enough. They don't think about what they're missing. They don't measure their lives in achievements, money, or recognition. They are simply here, laughing at anything, running without a reason, asking questions adults have long stopped asking. And it's not because they don't understand life. It's because they haven't yet learned to live at war with it. So when did we stop being children? At what point did we become convinced that to live fully was something we had to earn instead of something we were allowed to do by default? We tell ourselves it's maturity, that it's part of growing up. But what we don't dare admit is that somewhere along the way we were robbed of something essential. We were sold the idea that happiness is a goal, not a state, that we have to pay a price before we're allowed to enjoy. And while we keep paying, we keep losing. The other day I saw a little boy playing in the park. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old, and his only concern in life was chasing a leaf being carried by the wind. He fell, got up, laughed, tried again. Beside him, a woman, probably his mother, watched him with a furrowed brow as she stared at her phone. She looked tense, as if the world were about to collapse on her. Two worlds in the same scene. One, wrapped in the lightness of life, chasing leaves without caring about the outcome. The other, crushed by the gravity of existence, unable to see what was right in front of her. When did we stop being that child? It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow process, a constant drip of expectations, demands, and comparisons. We were taught that life isn't about chasing leaves, but about chasing stability, validation, and success. We were convinced that happiness isn't a right, but a privilege reserved for those who fulfill a long list of requirements. And so, little by little, we became tired adults, People who watch children play and feel a lump in their throat without knowing why. But we know. We know that at some point we stopped living and started surviving. They told us growing up meant leaving lightness behind, that laughing without a reason was childish, that wonder was a luxury, that time should be spent on useful things. But what could be more useful than enjoying existence? Life isn't about arriving anywhere. It's not an airport where you wait for your flight to happiness. Life is the flight itself. And here we are, seatbelts fastened, staring out the window, waiting for something to change, for someone to give us permission to let go of fear and breathe. But no one is going to give that permission. No one is going to tell us when it's enough. That decision is ours. Look at the people who live waiting for the perfect partner to give their life meaning, waiting for money to fix everything, waiting for recognition to make them feel worthy. And while they wait, they lose themselves. Not because happiness doesn't exist, but because they're looking for it in the wrong place. We were made to believe that fulfillment is a finish line, but it isn't. Fulfillment is a state of being. It isn't something you reach, it's something you cultivate. This doesn't mean giving up on dreams or ignoring responsibilities. It means understanding that true success is not collecting achievements, but living with lightness. Lightness doesn't mean irresponsibility. It doesn't mean avoiding hard things. It means letting go of what doesn't belong to us. Letting go of borrowed guilt, secondhand expectations, inherited frustration. It means making room for what truly nourishes us. So how do we get there? Here's the hard part. There's no single path, no magical formula, but there are clues. Look at the people who truly enjoy life. I don't mean the millionaires or the self-help gurus selling happiness in a bottle. I mean the ones who figured out something most people haven't. Watch those who, no matter what they have, radiate a peace that can't be bought. What do they do differently? For starters, they've given themselves permission to be. They don't ask for validation. They don't seek approval. They don't negotiate their well-being with the world. They've understood that no one is coming to save them from life, that no rescue is on the way, that the only one who can change their course is themselves. So they made a decision to let go of the unnecessary weight. They stopped postponing joy for later. They stopped carrying guilt that wasn't theirs. They stopped waiting for everything to be perfect before they started living. And in that release, they found true freedom. Because in the end, life is not a puzzle to solve. It's a mystery to be experienced. And the sooner we understand that, the sooner we'll be able to run after leaves again with the lightness of someone who knows that, in this very moment, they already have it all. Chapter 2. What are you really looking for? There's a weight, a burden no one sees, and maybe not even you feel it consciously. It's so subtle, so familiar that it becomes invisible. But it's there, hidden in daily decisions, in the places you've allowed yourself to stay because you were too afraid to leap. It doesn't show on the surface, but you can feel it. It's the weight of living as if you were the plan B of your own life. From an early age, we're taught to adjust, to do what's right, to follow the rules, to fit into molds we never chose. And in doing so, little by little, we lose the ability to truly choose who we are. We stop being ourselves and become what others expect of us, what society demands, what circumstances require. We adapt to what we're given, and that turns us into Plan B, always second best, always in the shadow of who we truly long to be. But what does it feel like to live that way? Imagine waking up every day and your mind isn't free to dream. It's trapped in what you're supposed to be. Your body moves by inertia, following a routine you didn't design. The weight isn't physical, not something you can point to, but it shows up in the tightness in your chest, in the anxiety that slips between the hours. You know there's something more, but the pressure to meet expectations drags you down. Do you remember what it felt like as a child to dream of becoming anything? What happened to that kid full of imagination, of fire, of eagerness to go beyond? They told us to be realistic, that life isn't a fairy tale. And with those messages, we lost the magic. They taught us that the goal was to adapt to the system. But who said the system should be the mold we're meant to fit? Who said we must extinguish our inner fire just because the world has different expectations? If we stop for a moment and reflect, we'll realize we've been living as if our life didn't belong to us. We've given away our power for the comfort of acceptance, for the illusion of belonging to something that never truly fit. We've let life roll over us, and by the time we notice, we're halfway through it. Have you ever felt like a side character in your own story? Like the plot of your life isn't even being written by you, but by other people's expectations, by society, by your fear of not fitting in. We spend our lives waiting for something to happen, for something to change, for the universe to finally align with our dreams. But what no one tells us is that while we wait, we're missing the only real chance we have to live here and now. Imagine someone tells you that if you follow a path, you'll get what you want. They tell you that if you work hard enough, sacrifice enough, give up your personal dreams for the sake of others, then something good will come to you. You wait eagerly, but it never comes. The plan never materializes. Why? Because all that time you were waiting, you weren't really living. You've been wasting time hoping something would come save you, when what you really needed was to start walking without waiting for anything. You've become a spectator in your own life, and when it all passes, you ask, "Where is my happiness?" But the real question we need to ask is, who told you to wait? Why have you been conditioned to believe that you need to live in the expectation of something or someone to validate you? The worst part is that, living like this, you've spent your entire life being the backup plan, the plan B. At first, you hold on to the idea that something better is coming, but when you finally realize the best moment is now, too much time has passed. So what happened? You postponed your life, waiting for something outside yourself to give you permission to be happy. You settled into the fear of rejection, into the belief that you couldn't be your true self. You squeezed into the molds handed down by society. But that's the big lie, that you need permission to be who you truly are. The truth is, they taught you not to be the protagonist of your own life, not to make your own decisions, but to live as an extra. You become the secondary story in your own narrative, watching others move freely through life while you wait for something to happen. But I want you to think about this carefully. What we've lived until now is not the only option. The story of your life can be different. You don't have to keep waiting for things to change. You are no one's plan B, and least of all, the plan B of your own life. Now imagine something different. Imagine that instead of waiting, you make a radical choice, regardless of what others might think. Imagine freeing yourself from the lie of living to meet expectations and deciding to live for yourself. How would that feel? That's the first step to stop being the plan B of your own existence. The difference between those who have control over their lives and those who wait for things to change lies in one thing: action. Control isn't about what others do. It's about what you choose to do with your life. The secret to stop being plan B is to stop living for others and start living for yourself. It's an act of courage to begin living for you, to take the reins of your life, to stop following the script and start writing your own story. That's what it means to be the protagonist of your life. And to do that, you must break the fear of failure, break the fear of not fitting in, and start following what you truly desire, regardless of what others may think. Freedom doesn't come when you adapt to what others expect. Freedom comes when you allow yourself to be you, when you stop living for someone else's approval. The fear of judgment and the need to be perfect have taught us to live in invisible cages, repeating to ourselves that we can't act, that we can't be who we are. But what if I told you that you're already perfect just as you are? The path to true freedom isn't found in the pursuit of perfection, but in embracing your imperfections and being faithful to your essence. We go through life with a constant sense of dissatisfaction, as if we were always chasing something just out of reach. They tell us happiness is in having, in becoming, in achieving what we lack. But the truth is, that search is endless. Deep down, what we're really looking for is our own self. The answer has never been outside, it's always been within. The problem is, we've forgotten how to listen. We've forgotten how to trust ourselves. We've forgotten that everything we need is already inside. They've taught us to believe that if we don't reach what the world defines as success, then we're not enough. What happens when we stop chasing who we're supposed to be and begin embracing who we truly are? What happens when you let go of the fear of imperfection, the fear of not fitting into society's molds, the fear of being different? That's the moment real transformation begins. You're no longer dependent on what others think of you. You stop caring about what society tells you happiness should look like. What matters now is what you choose to be. Because if you keep waiting for the world to give you permission to be happy, to be yourself, you'll never stop feeling like something is missing. You'll keep chasing more, but never find fulfillment. The secret lies in stopping the search outside of you for something that only exists within. It's time to step out of the script others have written for you. You're not here to be anyone's plan B, not even your own. You're the only protagonist of your life. And the moment to take control is now. The first step is accepting that you don't need to be perfect, that you don't need to meet anyone's expectations, that you don't have to be what they say you should be. What truly matters is being true to who you really are. On this path, freedom is not something others give you. It's not a gift the world hands over. Freedom is something you choose to claim. Freeing yourself from other people's expectations, freeing yourself from the pressure to meet their standards, that's your first act of real autonomy. Because there is no one freer than the person who chooses to live by their own rules, who stops seeking validation from the outside and starts believing in themselves. They told you you weren't enough, that you weren't who you should be, but the truth is, you are far more than you can imagine. If you stop living to fulfill someone else's wishes and start living for yourself, life becomes richer, deeper, more authentic. And that's what truly matters. Not the money, not the status, not what others see in you. What matters is that the moment you decide to be yourself, the world begins to align in your favor. Everything becomes possible when you choose to be loyal to your own truth. Pablo was always the type of person who waited. He waited for things to change, for something magical to happen that would offer him all the answers. He lived a life of quiet conformity, not because he lacked potential, but because he let himself be carried by the current. Everything he said, everything he did, was filtered through the belief that someday things would change on their own. One day, I'll dare, he thought. But that day never came, and the years passed, slowly erasing his essence. There was a pivotal moment in his life. During a meeting with his boss, he was offered a promotion. Pablo felt relieved. This is everything I wanted, he thought. Finally, the recognition I deserve. But as he sat with the offer, something strange tightened in his chest. What he had dreamed of had arrived. But did he really want it? Or had he been chasing approval all along? That night, as he walked alone through his neighborhood, he remembered something his mother had once told him as a child. True freedom is the ability to choose what you truly want. In that instant, something cracked open inside him. Why hadn't he seen it before? He'd been following someone else's path, seeking external approval, always waiting for something outside himself to complete him. but everything he needed had always been within. Life doesn't wait, dreams don't wait, time doesn't wait, and Pablo realized he was losing his life by waiting to live. The key was in shifting his perspective, in no longer being a spectator in his own story. From that night on, Pablo decided he wouldn't wait anymore. He wasn't going to be the plan B of his life. From that moment forward, he would be the plan A. He chose to let go of the fears that kept him stuck in a life that wasn't truly his, and he started making small but meaningful changes. Of course, it wasn't easy. There were doubts. There was fear. Many of his friends didn't understand his decision to walk away from the job he'd once longed for, but he could no longer live under someone else's expectations. He realized that if he wasn't honest with himself, he could never live fully. The only way forward was to leave behind the comfort zone and embrace uncertainty. What Pablo did that night, what he chose instead of continuing to wait for the perfect moment, was to leap into the unknown. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that real freedom lives where fear ends. And here lies the greatest truth. Life doesn't begin when the circumstances change. Life begins when we change. Freedom doesn't come from waiting or from adapting to the world's demands. Freedom is choosing who you truly want to be. Freedom is stopping the endless wait and finally stepping into your story. Because if you're not the protagonist of your life, who will be? Pedro had always believed life was like a waiting room. Since he was a child, he was told the perfect moment was just around the corner. When you grow up, they said, when you get a good job, when you start a family, when you retire, when you can finally rest. And so, he kept postponing real life, convinced that someday that ideal moment would arrive. But life offered no breaks. The years passed like a train with no brakes, and one day, at 45, Pedro found himself staring into the mirror asking, when does life actually begin? It was in a random cafe on a gray Wednesday afternoon that a conversation with a friend changed everything. His friend Daniel, who shared his job, his routine, and his way of measuring life by what's coming, had just received a devastating diagnosis. He had 6 months to live. No more. Pedro looked at his friend in silence. He tried to find the right words, but everything he could think of sounded empty. Daniel, calm and almost serene, took a sip of his coffee and smiled. "Now my life begins," he said. Pedro shivered. "What do you mean now?" Daniel explained that, for the first time in his life, everything was clear. There was no more time to delay decisions, no more room to postpone joy or live according to others' expectations. He could no longer afford to be the backup plan in his own story. Now, there was only space for what was real, for what was true. Pedro left that cafe feeling disoriented. His heart beat with rage, with fear, with something he couldn't quite name. Why wait for a catastrophe to start living? Why had he allowed his life to become a collection of excuses, of "there's still time," of "someday"? That night, he couldn't sleep. Each passing second, each heartbeat echoed the same truth. Time doesn't wait for anyone. The clock doesn't stop. There's no second round, no warning. Life doesn't ask if you're ready. The trap of routine is that it makes you believe you have all the time in the world. But one day, you wake up and realize 20 years have gone by and you're still waiting for the right moment. The worst part is that your mind gets used to the waiting. It becomes addicted to the idea that the present is not enough, that something is always missing, that one day you'll be happier. They sold us the lie that happiness is a destination, not something that happens in the now. But the future doesn't exist. There's only this moment. Pedro realized that while he didn't have just 6 months to live, he also didn't have time to keep living halfway. So he made a decision. He was going to truly live. The first step was radical. That same week, he quit his job, one he had never loved, but which gave him security. His friends told him he was crazy, that it wasn't the right time to take risks, that he should wait. Wait. Always wait. But Pedro had seen through the illusion. He wouldn't wait any longer. He sold the car that had never made him happy, left the city that had kept him on pause, and moved to the seaside. Not because the sea was the solution, but because the solution was doing what he truly wanted. For the first time in his life, Pedro felt light, as if he had finally taken off the weight of years spent postponing. Some will say that's reckless, that not everyone can quit, sell everything, and move to the ocean. But the real lesson here isn't what Pedro did, it's what he stopped doing. He stopped waiting. Because you can stay in the same job, in the same city with the same people, but when you stop postponing your life, everything changes. And if there's something to regret in life, it's not having started sooner. It's not about living longer, but about living with more life. The problem isn't that we have little time, it's that we waste it. If each day were lived as if it were the last, we would make different choices. Not because life has to be a frenzy, but because when you remember that time doesn't stop, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. What would you do if you knew you had 1 year left to live? Most people would say they'd travel, say, "I love you" more often. Stop worrying about nonsense. So why aren't they doing it now? Because they still believe the lie that there's time. We've been led to believe that life is a checklist. Study, work, marry, buy a house, retire. But when the list ends, what's left? The question we should all be asking is not, how much time do I have? But how am I using the time I have? Pedro realized life isn't a waiting room. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance. And if time is our most valuable currency, why do we treat it like it's unlimited? Life is now, not when you have more money, not when someone else tells you it's the right moment. Now, you are not your life's backup plan. You are plan A. And if you keep waiting for the perfect moment, be ready to realize, too late, that the perfect moment was always this one. Chapter 3. The Art of Getting Lost in Life. There's something everyone eventually learns in life. It's not about winning. It's about stopping the losses. Stop losing your laughter as you grow older. Stop losing your sense of wonder when the world demands you be mature. Stop wasting time on the wrong people, on useless worry, on problems that exist only in your mind. Life isn't complicated. We are. We take ourselves too seriously, as if the world revolved around our anxieties and deadlines. But deep down, if we vanished tomorrow, the universe wouldn't even flinch. The sun would keep rising, rivers would keep flowing, and someone on the other side of the world would still be laughing at a silly joke without ever knowing we existed. Doesn't that give you a strange sense of relief? We think we're the center of the story, but we're just a chapter in a book that's already being written. What if, instead of trying to control everything, we just lived? Squeezed every drop out of life instead of simply surviving it? But no, we choose the other path. We become slaves to our own minds. We cling to labels, titles, ridiculous comparisons. We believe there's something out there we must attain to feel complete, without realizing we're running in circles, like a dog chasing its own tail. And one day, without warning, life punches us in the face. In a quiet corner of the world where few ever look, something worth remembering happened. A woman in her 40s walked into a bookstore. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, but her eyes locked onto a book with a title that read something like, "The Art of Not Screwing Up Your Life." She picked it up, flipped through a few pages, and suddenly felt the urge to cry. Not because of the title, but because in that precise moment she realized her whole life had been a long collection of if-onlys. If only she had said yes to that trip. If only she had quit that job she hated sooner. If only she had kissed more, laughed more, danced without worrying who was watching. If only she had lived with less fear. She stood there frozen, holding a book and a truth too heavy to ignore. She wasn't living. She was simply passing time. That's the great deception. They tell us life is a straight line, that we must move forward without question, without stopping for too long. But the truth is, life isn't a line. It's a circle. One day you're there, with the whole world ahead of you, and the next, without knowing how, you're right back where you started, wondering where all the years went. And there is no worse feeling than realizing you've been a spectator in your own life. They taught us life happens out there, that happiness is a destination, not a natural state. But what if it's the other way around? What if happiness isn't something you chase, but something you allow? Look at a small child. They don't need a reason to laugh. They don't care if their hair is messy, if their clothes match, or if someone is watching. They just are. They run, they play, they laugh with food in their mouth without caring if it looks silly. Then we grow up and someone tells us life is serious, that we need a plan, that we must fit into certain molds. And so, little by little, we disconnect from ourselves. Adulthood becomes a collection of renunciations. We give up spontaneity, guilt-free fun, the simplicity of existing without justification. We become programmed robots, doing the right thing, even if the right thing kills us inside. We obsess over appearances, the future, what people think. We fill ourselves with stuff, titles, expectations that were never truly ours. We define ourselves by what we do, what we own, what we post on social media. And worst of all, we believe all this will make us feel whole. But peace never comes from the outside. It never has. Peace comes when you stop running, when you realize there's nothing to prove, when you understand that life isn't a competition, it's a gift. And in the end, there are only two ways to live, in fear or in freedom. Imagine it's the last day of your life. No more excuses, no more future plans. Just you, looking back, reviewing all you did and all you didn't. What would make you smile? What would make you regret? What would make you wish you had lived differently? Life isn't fair or unfair. Life simply is. It's not about what the world gives you, it's about what you do with it. And the saddest part isn't dying. The saddest part is reaching the end without having truly lived. You don't need more time. You don't need more validation. You don't need to wait until everything is in place. You just need to wake up. Because the secret to life is this: either you live it or you spend it thinking about it. And time waits for no one. Throughout life, many people walk like ghosts of themselves, dragging inherited guilt, carrying sorrow that isn't theirs, bearing demands they never questioned. We live in a world where the norm is to carry burdens and believe we only exist to meet others' expectations, as if life were about fulfilling a checklist imposed by an invisible committee dictating how we should act, how we should feel, and what we should want. But here's the truth no one tells you. None of that is real. What's real is this moment. What's real is now. What's real is the heartbeat that doesn't wait for you to have everything figured out before it keeps you alive. They made us believe that we need to reach certain milestones to deserve happiness, that peace comes only after suffering enough, that fulfillment is a reward for those who've been responsible, sacrificial, or cautious. But life isn't a reward system. There's no secret jury judging whether you deserve to enjoy your existence. Yet we spend our days waiting for that permission. If you're not where you want to be, who told you that you had to stay there? If your life doesn't feel like yours, why are you still holding on to it? The answer is always the same: fear. Fear of letting go, fear of disappointing others, fear of failing, fear of being judged. We cling to situations, people, and beliefs that drain us because we prefer the pain we know over the freedom we don't. But here's something you must understand. Being free isn't a reward, it's a decision. Being free doesn't mean abandoning your responsibilities or running from life. It means no longer living under the invisible chains others placed on you, which you accepted as your own. Try a simple exercise. Imagine waking up today with no roles to play. You're not anyone's child, not anyone's partner, not an employee, not responsible for justifying yourself or fitting into any mold. You're not the strong one, the successful one, the reliable one, the friendly one, the one who's always available. You just are. You simply exist. What would you do? What would you feel? That lightness you just imagined, that is proof of how much unnecessary weight you carry every day. Now let me tell you something even more brutal. The life you're postponing out of fear of making mistakes is a life you will never get back. There's a true story that few people know about a gifted pianist who dazzled the world in his youth with his talent. He had it all: recognition, concert offers, the admiration of great masters. But one day, he decided it wasn't enough, that he needed to be more, that he had to prove to himself he could achieve perfection. He locked himself away to practice without rest. He perfected every technique, polished every note, studied every piece until he understood it with obsessive precision. His goal was to play without a single flaw, and he succeeded. But when he finally returned to the stage, no one remembered him. Too many years had passed. The audience had changed, the industry too. He became a master in the solitude of his own expectations, impeccable in something he never shared with the world. He spent his life chasing the idea of perfection and forgot the essential truth. Life happens when you allow yourself to live it, not when you believe you're finally ready to do so. And just like that pianist, there are thousands of people wasting their existence, waiting for the ideal moment to become who they truly want to be. But that moment never comes, because it's not the world that needs to grant them permission. It's them who must decide. Life will not pause to wait for you. There won't be a magical sign someday assuring you it's safe to be who you really are. There's no judge who will one day rule. Now you're finally good enough to live the life you want. If that's what you're waiting for, you'll die waiting, because the only person who can grant you that freedom is you. Life isn't a draft you can revise indefinitely before handing it in. It's a single manuscript written in real time. There's no edit button. There is no second version. So stop postponing the inevitable. Stop pretending you can't hear that inner voice shouting that the time is now. There is no better moment than this one to begin being your own center. There's a moment in life when everything becomes unbearably clear. It might strike in traffic on an ordinary afternoon. It might show up at a cafe table while you watch the foam dissolve into your cup. Or it might hit you like a punch to the gut when you receive an unexpected call and realize someone you thought eternal is suddenly gone. That moment is when you realize everything you believed was important, everything you delayed, everything you took for granted was life itself, and you let it slip away. But we don't want to think about that. We avoid that feeling at all costs because it terrifies us to admit we've been wasting time, that we've become experts at delaying, pretending, enduring the unbearable in the hope that eventually it will all be worth it. We tell ourselves stories to avoid facing what we already know. We say, the time will come. This is just a phase. When everything settles down, then we'll finally do what we truly want. But the truth is, the moment never comes. Not because it doesn't exist, but because we don't claim it. And so time keeps moving. We wake up every morning in the same routine, repeat the same steps, and convince ourselves we're moving forward, when, in truth, we're reliving the same day with minor variations. One day you look back and realize you've lived the same year 20 times, believing you lived 20 years. And the question becomes unavoidable. How many more days will you waste waiting for permission to live? There's a story that illustrates this perfectly. A man dreamed of traveling the world, but the right moment never came. There was always something holding him back. First college, then work, later family. He saved money, made plans, but never took the leap. One day, when he finally felt ready, when he believed he had earned the right to go on the adventure, he discovered his health could no longer keep up. His body, the same body he'd pushed relentlessly to achieve things, failed him at the exact moment he was about to enjoy life. What he never understood was that the journey doesn't begin with a plane ticket. It begins the moment you decide to stop waiting. But it's not all tragedy. Here's the good news. You're still here. You still have the chance to do something with what remains. It doesn't matter how long you've postponed, how many years you've spent doing what didn't fulfill you, how many times you've doubted yourself. You can still make this moment the turning point. Because the only thing that separates those who truly live from those who merely exist is a single decision: to stop asking for permission to be who they are. You don't need more signs. You don't need more proof. You don't need more time. You just need to decide. No matter how often you tell yourself that you can't, that it's not that simple, that there are responsibilities, that now's not the right time, there will always be excuses. There will always be reasons not to. But if you let those reasons be stronger than your desire to live, you've signed an invisible contract with mediocrity, choosing a half-lived life instead of seizing it with both hands. And if one thing is clear after all this, it's that you were born for more. The question is, when will you start acting like you know that? Life has always been a calculated risk. There's no instruction manual, no guarantees, no safety line to tell us what's right or what will make us regret things 10 years from now. But one thing is certain: the greatest risk of all is not living. Fear whispers that the known is safer than the unknown, that it's better to stay in a predictable routine than to leap into the void. And so, day after day, we build a prison with no bars, made of habits and excuses. We settle for jobs that don't fulfill us, for relationships that no longer inspire us, for routines that wear us down, simply because we're terrified of change. We've trained ourselves for comfort, not for life. And life, in turn, will not wait for us to be ready. Every day we postpone is a day that will never return. Every opportunity we let slip away becomes an echo fading into time. Have you ever stopped to think about how many things you didn't do out of fear? The words you never said, the letter you never sent, the love you never confessed, the door you never dared to cross. And the most ironic part is that fear doesn't disappear with time. It transforms into regret. And regret, believe me, is a much harder monster to face. Think about it. In recent years, how many times have you found yourself paralyzed by indecision? We've been taught to fear uncertainty, but no one ever told us that what's truly terrifying is the certainty of having never truly lived. A person can spend their entire life doing the right thing, following the safe path, avoiding all risks, and still reach a point where all they feel is that something was missing. Because the problem isn't losing, the problem is never playing. Imagine an old man lying on his deathbed. His eyes no longer see clearly. His skin maps the years he's carried. But in that final stretch, his mind plays back a film, not of what he achieved, but of all he let slip away. The chances he didn't take, the stories he never dared to write, the maybes that turned into nevers, the somedays that died without ever being born. If that man could go back in time, he wouldn't ask for more hours at the office. He wouldn't ask to be more cautious or to follow more rules. He would ask for courage. He would ask to have laughed louder, to have loved more fiercely, to have cried without shame, to have danced even without knowing how, to have said yes to life instead of waiting for the perfect moment. Because life isn't measured in years, it's measured in moments, and the time we waste waiting for the right time is time we never get back. So the real question is not, what if I try and fail? The real question is, what if I never try? And the answer is the harshest of all. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. Nothing gets better. Nothing feels more alive. You simply remain in the same place, carrying the same dull ache that something's missing, without the courage to discover what it might have been. If there's something we can learn from those who truly live, it's this. They don't have perfect lives. They don't have all the answers. They don't have a clear map of where they're going. But they do have one thing that changes everything: the courage to try. So I ask you, will you keep waiting for life to give you permission, or will you take it for yourself? Because time doesn't stop. And the moment to live isn't tomorrow or later or when everything falls into place. It's now. Some people live as if they were rehearsing for something else. They wake up, fulfill their obligations, put on polite smiles when necessary, and at the end of the day, alone in their room, they feel something is missing. They don't know exactly what it is, but there's a void, a sense of walking in circles as if life were on hold, waiting for something else to begin. But the truth is, this is not a rehearsal. There's no second act where everything will finally make sense. Life is already happening right now, and time doesn't stop to wait for someone to decide to live it. In a quiet corner of the world where few people look, something happened that's worth remembering. A man, 45 years old, had spent his entire life believing that the most important things were stability, the future, and planning. He had worked tirelessly, building a secure life. He had a house, savings, and a plan for retirement. But one day, without warning, he received a diagnosis: 6 months to live. In that moment, everything he had accumulated lost its meaning. He realized he had spent his entire existence preparing for a future that would never come. He sat in a cafe and watched people go by. He saw young people lost in their phones, executives rushing by, couples arguing over nonsense. And he wondered, how many of them are truly living? How many, like him, are postponing happiness for a moment that might never arrive? That was the day he did something he had never done before. He took a flight without a destination. He chose the first available ticket without caring where it went. For the first time in his life, he was improvising. The curious thing is that when he let go of plans and structures, life began to surprise him. He met wonderful people, saw landscapes he'd never imagined, tasted foods he didn't even know existed. But more importantly, for the first time, he felt truly alive, not waiting, not planning, not wishing, just living. This man, who had spent decades thinking about the future, finally understood in his final months what many never do. Life is not about how much time we have, but what we do with the time we're given. It's not about accumulating, it's about experiencing. It's not about arriving at a destination, but learning to enjoy the journey. And this is where many people fail. We've been taught that life must follow a script: study, work, get married, have kids, save money, retire, and only then enjoy. But no one tells us what happens if time runs out. No one explains how to live without guarantees or certainties. No one teaches us that fulfillment is not a future reward, but something we build in the present. We become experts at postponing life. We tell ourselves, when I have more money, when I have more time, when I'm ready. But the truth is, life doesn't wait. It doesn't ask if we're ready. It simply happens, and if you don't live it, you lose it. So, how do we live for real? There's no universal formula, but one thing is clear: we must dare. Dare to step off the script, to do things that scare us, to let go of others' expectations. Sometimes, the only thing separating an ordinary life from an extraordinary one is a single decision. If you woke up tomorrow with the certainty that you had only a few months left to live, what would you change? What would you stop doing? What would you start doing immediately? Those answers are the key to everything. Because the truth is, life has always been uncertain, always been limited. You don't need a diagnosis to remind you that every day counts. It's not about living in fear of death, but with respect for life. It's about understanding that time is the most valuable thing we have, and every moment is an opportunity to do something meaningful. It doesn't matter if it's something big or small. What matters is that you do it consciously, with presence, with intention. Because in the end, the question isn't how much time you lived, but how much of that time you truly embraced. Life is like a dance. Some move through it with grace, others with clumsiness. Some stand in the corner waiting for someone to invite them in, while others, unsure of the rhythm, jump in, dare, improvise, and enjoy every step, even when they stumble. The great difference between those who live and those who merely exist is not luck or talent or opportunity. It's the decision to move. Because here's the truth. No one is coming to save you. No one will take your hand and teach you the perfect choreography. No one will guarantee your steps are the right ones. But if you wait too long, if you keep believing that someday everything will magically fall into place, you risk realizing too late that the music has already stopped. In a quiet corner of the world where few people look, something happened that's worth remembering. A man spent his entire life accumulating reasons to wait. He said that once he had more money, he'd start traveling, that once he felt safer, he'd risk love, that once he had time, he'd do what really moved him. But time never felt abundant, money never felt enough, security never came. And when he finally understood, it was already too late. Don't let the same happen to you. Don't become the plan B of your own existence. You have to make a decision. You can keep sitting at the table, watching others dance, envying their courage, telling yourself maybe someday you'll dare. Or you can stand up, push aside the fear, and move to the rhythm of your own heart. Don't worry about getting it perfect. No one does. No one has all the answers. We're all improvising, stumbling, learning as we go. But those who truly live are the ones who understand that the meaning of life isn't in avoiding missteps. It's in daring to take the next one. And now the question is, what will you do with this? Will you close this book and continue with your life as if nothing has changed? Or will you take this moment as the beginning of something new? Because the only truth is this: life doesn't wait. Either you become the center of your own story, or you'll remain a shadow in someone else's. You decide. And so we reach the end of this journey, but not the end of the path. Because what you've discovered today, what you've felt, what you've understood, is only the beginning, a beginning that can change everything. If this audiobook touched your soul, if it made you question, if it sparked something within you, then keep exploring, keep growing, keep awakening with us. Here at Let There Be Light, you'll find more paths, more climbs, and more answers. We'll meet again in the next audiobook. And until then, remember, life isn't something you wait for. It's something you live. Fulfillment isn't something you find. It's something you choose. And you, here and now, already have everything you need to begin. See you soon!